Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by James Kademan, author of the Bold Business Book. James, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me and taking the time to interview.
All right, my friend, you ready to get started?
I am.
All right, question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
I would say do everything you can to get it as complete as you are barely satisfied with so that you can actually get it out there. I see a lot of clients that I deal with that, from a business coaching point of view, where they aim for perfection, and of course they never achieve it, and therefore they never actually accomplish anything. So I say good enough and done beats perfect and not done.
Absolutely. One of the phrases that I've used often on the show is done is better than perfect. You can always create a second edition, you can create revisions down the line, but just get that book out there and share it with the world.
Yep, totally agree.
Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
My hardest part, I guess I went the self-publishing route, so the hardest part was learning where to go, just the different websites, the different logins. It's still kind of clunky. It's not, I wouldn't call it difficult once you do it, but I suppose it's like the first time you buy a house. First time you buy a house, you're overwhelmed by all the paperwork and things you have to do. But after you buy your first one, it's easy, on the verge to do it again. So it's just figuring out all the little steps and listening to all the podcasts, the videos, reading books, trying to figure out the easiest path. And I guess the challenge is that a lot of those paths, after they've been documented, change. We got Amazon where they just absorbed, or they moved CreateSpace into Kindle, where that used to be two separate things. So just navigating the clunkiness, we'll call it.
Yeah, and it's always changing, and that was one of the big changes when Amazon absorbed CreateSpace. I mean, they own CreateSpace, but they decided to absorb them, and they've made things more complicated. Mm-hmm. It is tougher now to have books approved, especially the paperback versions, where I've had several clients had multiple issues with because Amazon's just gotten so picky. But one of the things is the biggest consistent in publishing, I think it's any industry, is it's always going to change. There's always going to be changes, and you have to be able to work with someone who can stay on top of those changes because it's going to happen. There's always going to be a curveball. And when Amazon owns so much in the marketplaces they do, they're going to change things. That's just how these companies operate.
Yeah. Yep. Change for the sake of change, not necessarily improvement.
Yeah.
But yeah, to get keeps a few people employed there trying to navigate all that.
Yeah, and just staying on top of it, because publishing, my first book came out 4 years ago, and the game has completely changed. And one of the main things is with I have 13 books out now, and obviously the books that we take care of for our clients as well. And the nicest thing with that is we're able to stay on top of those changes because there's just one little curveball that can change the whole thing. Another big change is everyone and their dog now are using Amazon marketing services, which is crazy because you're actually paying Amazon to market your book, but now everyone else is also paying Amazon to market their book. So you really got to stay on top of things and realize, okay, how can my book still really stand out from all these other books now that are actually paying Amazon to market my book?
Yes. It's an interesting position for Amazon to be in, where they're getting paid by the author to market the book on Amazon's platform, in which Amazon is taking a pretty decent-sized cut of the sale once it's made. So they're kind of taking it at both ends, which is, from a business decision, smart. Cool. Good for them.
I call it the Tom Sawyer effect. So there's always that scene in Tom Sawyer in both the movie and in the book where he had to paint that fence.
Sure.
And he was able to essentially hustle all these kids into into thinking, oh, it's such a great experience to paint this fence. Oh, we're having such a great time.
Right.
And then not only does he get them to
So much
pay the fence,
fun.
yeah, not only does he get them to do the fence, he gets them to pay him for the privilege of painting that fence. And that's what Amazon Marketing
Right.
Services reminds me of.
Yeah, it's genius. But in the end, it helps you sell books. So what are you gonna do?
Exactly. To make money, you got to spend money. And that's going to transition nicely to our
Mm-hmm.
next question, and that is about marketing. So please share
Mm-hmm.
a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Mm-hmm. The best thing that I've done so far has been Amazon ads. I use KDP Rocket, the software, to figure out what keywords to tackle. And I create ads based on using those keywords, and then you just play with the cost per click and the overall cost per day, or however they have it set up, and just see what works. And when you find ads that work, then you duplicate those and tweak a little bit, and just it's a wait and see game in regards to that. But Amazon ads by far has been the biggest bang for the buck. I've tried Facebook ads; those were useless. I tried Google AdWords. And those were okay, but from a cost per click point of view, for the profit you make on one book, you end up negative, so I couldn't run with that. So, and then selling them at expos and stuff, that's a lot of money for not a whole lot of return. So, to actually make money, Amazon ads has been the best.
Yeah, and it's a process. I think one of the biggest things people need to realize is you can't just create a set of ads and expect it to last forever. What happens is when you
No.
do get a different, like let's say you get 10 to 15 ads going for your book in January, what you have to realize is then you also need to create another 10 to 15 sets of ads for February. And then when you go into March, the same thing, because what happens is it's going to age itself. And those keywords are not going to be as effective. So you have to create new ad sets. So one thing I will share on the show is typically you want to have the cost at roughly 10 to 15 cents per keyword for those sets to make sure that you're getting the best bang for your buck. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've experimented with the numbers a little bit and seen what you put as cost per click. I think the highest I've done is 50 cents, and the lowest I think was a nickel, just to see if that makes any difference. And you're right, in the 10 to 15 cent range, you do pretty well. I threw an ad out where I was, what was I trying to do? I was trying to tackle, sometimes I jump on the kind of the book of the month, so to speak. Like recently it was Michelle Obama's, before that Trump had one. And there's the books that's like the whole world is looking for at that moment. So those ads, those clicks tend to be a little bit pricier, but they're also, Amazon can serve those ads because they have so many people looking for those books. Whereas if you get too niche, then there's 5 people a month that are actually looking for that ad, and if there's more than 5 authors, whatever, that are trying to compete for that space, there's a challenge there.
Yeah, one of the other strategies too is to use as many keywords as possible because you just never know what people are going to search for because Amazon is essentially a huge search engine. Now, another thing I'll mention is too, you have to be careful because I've actually done bids for $1 to $1.50 for a book, nonfiction book, and even business book or travel book. And I've actually lost my lunch in a few of those where we've lost $50 to $100. So you have to be really careful
Sure.
on those bidding points. So one strategy is that my guy uses, who does my ads, is he just uses maybe 100 to 200 keywords, and some of them sound so random. But the amazing thing is if they hit, then your profit margins are quite nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess Amazon shows that average cost of sale, and I like to see that, or not the average cost of sale. It's the percentage. Yeah, average cost of sale. So I like to see that the break-even point for me is right around 30%.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not here to break even. I'm here to make money. So I look at seeing what I can do to get that under 20%. And you can see some ads that are above that threshold. You understand, well, even though you sold some books, you didn't make any money because of the cost of printing, publishing, all that jazz. So it's interesting how Amazon doesn't give you the number based on the money that you made, only on the cost from a revenue point of view, not necessarily a profit point of view.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest challenges. And I think that's why people get frustrated with this process and why a lot of people outsource. I mean, I'll say I outsource. I understand the process with it, But I mean, I got
Mm-hmm.
13 books. I'm not going to create all these ad sets every month. Just I don't have the time to do it. So I've outsourced it to a person
Yeah.
who does a great job. But I also know he utilizes KDP Rocket as well. I also have the program. Dave Cheson's the one who created it. I've actually known him for several
Mm-hmm.
years. And the nice thing is, they're always making changes and updates to the program. So for those of you that are
They
listening to
are.
the
Yep.
show today, I highly recommend look up KDP Rocket because there is a lot of value. It is an investment. What are they currently charging for it? I bought it a couple of years ago.
I paid $100. It
Yeah,
was well worth it.
yeah. I mean, the return
Yeah.
of
It was
investment.
little. Yeah. It gives you a starting point for keywords. Where before, I don't know what people would do. Just come up with a spreadsheet and start typing anything they think of. For KDP Rocket, you can just type in a keyword and it gives you a list that are related. It's a lot of information for that $100.
Yeah,
So I think it's well worth it.
yeah, and they also help with category research as well. So they'll actually help you
Yeah.
with finding
Yep.
categories for your books, and you can actually take some of those words and utilize that as part of your keyword campaign as well. So there's a lot of little technical
Mhm.
things that you can utilize with it. But for those of you that want to actually take that journey and want to learn how to do this yourself, that is a great resource to use. If I think it's the best resource that you can find is KDP Rocket. You can also utilize searches on Amazon, also searches on Google, and just type in words and see what clicks. But from what I've seen, for the
Mhm.
best bang for the buck, KDP Rocket definitely gets the job done.
Mhm. Totally agree. Yeah. Awesome program.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So we'll go on to the hard question, so to speak, and that is, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
you know, I hate to say this because it's kind of cliche, but the 4 Hour Work Week has been my favorite nonfiction book so far. And it's not necessarily the individual content. It was more a broader picture than that. I remember I was reading this book, and there's every once in a while when you're reading a book, there's these moments when you just stop and you look up and you're like, "Holy cow, I've been living a lie." And that book, The 4 Hour Work Week, was one of those epiphany books. Where it's just the whole, not every job takes 40 hours, and if that's truly the case, then why would you pick a job that takes more than 40 hours? Why would you pick a job that takes 40 hours? Why don't you pick a job that takes 5? And it's a little bit of the step by step of how to get that done, but in the end, it was the not every job has to take 40 hours that me from up in Wisconsin here, we got Midwest work ethic, which, except for some of the younger employees I've had to deal with, generally speaking, is a good thing where you just feel like you have to get the job done all the time. But you're like, oh, I'm just filling time. And it's one of those like, holy cow, if this is truly the case, then, and then you just think, well, what changes can I make in my business? And it was a paradigm shift. So that one was super cool. And Tim Ferriss, the author, has got a lot of cool stuff. I want to hate him. I really do, because he's just. I think there's a little bit of arrogance there, but I think it's earned. And so you're just like, how did this guy figure all this stuff out? And you feel like I should have known that, right? It's not like he's any smarter than I am. But in the end, he's the one that figured it out and wrote the book. So kudos to him for knocking it out.
Yeah,
I've read a lot of books, and a lot of them have been great. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography, fantastic book.
oh yeah,
But
I'm
as far
actually
as
looking
the
at it right now.
paradigm shift, yeah, it's such an interesting. That book alone, the Arnold Schwarzenegger autobiography, Total Recall, is a great book because you just imagine as I'm reading this, I'm kind of reading it in his voice, which that alone is entertaining. But then you're like, this guy did so much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just so much. The real estate, the bodybuilding, the movies, the governor, all this stuff, right? And he just built upon his success. So I teach a business planning class, and I use that to my students because they want to build the super awesome business right on day one. And I tell them, hold on. You can't do that. You got to build upon your success little by little by little. And then over the course of time, you'll have this phenomenal thing. But there's no such thing as a light switch business where you're just going to turn it on and it's going to instantly be this miraculous money-making machine.
Yeah,
So it's kind of
I was going to say, too, Total Recall is one of my all-time favorite books. So I'm recording this in my home office right now, and I have a bunch of books on my shelf, but I have this one special shelf right below my table, and it has some of my favorite books. Steve Jobs,
Right.
2 books from Sir Alex Ferguson, the longtime Manchester United manager. Even got a book on the great Ric Flair. We have books about Frank McCourt,
Oh, nice.
the Freedom Riders
Sure.
Diary. Even a book called The Damn United, Success Through Positive Mental Attitude. But the other book I've got is Arnold Schwarzenegger, Total Recall. And what many people don't realize, he was a millionaire before he even got into acting. He built his body,
Yeah.
and then he built this business. He built business with the gyms,
Mm-hmm.
and then he invested in commercial real estate. And that is what made him a millionaire before he even got into acting, and then going from acting
Yep.
to politics. I mean, it really is an
Yeah.
amazing book. It's a big book. It's going to take a little while to read, but it's one of the best books I've ever read. So I'm so glad that you mentioned
Yeah.
that. Your first guest has actually talked about Total Recall. It really is an amazing book, and you can get it on thrift books for like $5. So I definitely recommend checking it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an awesome book. It was a cool story, and he's not done, right? He's still going, so it's kind of neat to see. And I'm of the age where I saw him, I guess maybe not in the 60s, but you saw him come up in movies and all this kind of stuff. Like, he's a household name. So you're like, oh, yeah, I remember that time when he was in Twins, and I remember the time when he was in Terminator, and that kind of changed the genre of movie and all this jazz. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I just love the puns. So over the past couple of weeks, I've been trying to get caught up on Game of Thrones. So I've seen all the episodes, but the final season start in mid-April. I'm actually going to be in Maui during that time, but I'm bringing specifically my HBO Go app just so we can watch the episodes while we're over there. And it was funny. I was watching the episode. I think it's like the 4th or 5th season, where it is. There's this moon door, and in this castle, lady. Long story short, she's like the sister of Catherine Stark, and she's having jealousy issues. She tries to push Sansa Stark through this moon door, and instead, the other guy's involved, that guy named Littlefinger, he ends up pushing the ant down there. And of course, the first thing I think is that pun from Schwarzenegger from Commando going, "I had to let him go," and actually doing the Schwarzenegger voice with that. It's just so funny that you get all these puns from these 80s movies. And you're right, when I read Total Recall, I was reading it in Schwarzenegger's head. It's like Morgan Freeman, when you're thinking of certain books, you kind of think about it in his voice. But Schwarzenegger is the same thing. Like, I'm going to talk about this. My name is Arnold. I did all this great stuff. And it's always that goofy Austrian accent that none of us can ever perfect like he can. But it's just such a funny thing reading that book in an Austrian accent.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the sentences, like the sentence structure seems a little simpler. So it's pretty cool. For the size of the book it was a pretty easy read.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorites.
Super awesome information.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, for a final question, I'll be curious about this one. What is your favorite quote and why?
I had to think about this one. I always tell my employees, do what you can with what you have where you are, from Teddy Roosevelt. A lot of times they'll come to me with something, there's some big fire or some big problem or something like that. And I'm like, did you do everything you could? And no, I didn't do everything I could. So, like, as a rule, I like to live my life by that quote or mantra or whatever, to just help people or convince people that to use all the resources that they have. And that's, it's been a lot of help for me. I even have a little Calvin and Hobbes cartoon where Calvin, if you're familiar with that cartoon, Calvin's in the bathtub, he's a little kid, and he says, Theodore Roosevelt said, do what you can with what you have where you are. And then he says, I don't think he was in the bathtub at the time.
Well, James, I want to
it's pretty cool. It's helped me.
James, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
The easiest way is to go to drawincustomers.com. That's a website where I got coaching, books, and all that jazz. I got a ton of information, videos, all kinds of stuff.
Excellent. Well, James, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Paul. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.